Now, also on the agenda at the ASEAN summit is likely to be the territorial dispute in the South China Sea. NHK has been granted rare access to one of the contested areas, the Spratly Islands, claimed by countries including China and the Philippines. Charmaine de Gracias begins a two-day special with this report on the efforts of the Philippine Navy to counter the spreading influence of China.
This is a Philippine Navy warship that will take us into the disputed zone. The supplies being loaded are for residents of the Spratly and other islands controlled by the Philippines. This is the first in a very long time that a foreign media will actually witness a routine troop rotation and logistics supply run in the disputed area of the South China Sea. The warship was built in 1943 in the middle of World War II. The Philippine Navy has made little progress modernizing its fleet. Many of its vessels are decades old. Immediately after the ship leaves port, the electrical system goes down. The motor for the wheel loses power. The only solution is brute force. The next morning, there is tension on deck.
Good morning, sir. There's the Seahawk.
An unidentified military helicopter has appeared in the sky. It apparently flew past the ship several times during the night to have a closer look. Our ship is headed for Ayungin Reef, where the Philippine military has a base. 16 years ago, China built a structure in shallow waters about 40 kilometers west of the reef. That gave it de facto control of the area. In response, the Philippines stationed a vessel on the reef to check the advances of China. We're the first TV crew to be allowed so deep inside the disputed zone. 4 Navy personnel are stationed here, keeping watch over the surrounding waters.
This is our radio room.
They communicate via radio with other Philippine bases and with passing ships. They are stationed on the island around the clock, rotated out every few months. Supplies are delivered only once a month. All they get are 2 drums of gasoline and a little more than 50 kilograms of rice.
The rice is not enough. We're running out of supplies.
The Navy personnel stationed here catch fish to make up for the shortage of food. On the deck are pots for growing vegetables. They look after a good portion of their needs by themselves. Words of prayer are written on the rusty walls.
All we see are Chinese warships. We have a very few weapons to speak of. But we have to deal with all kinds of situations.
There's little prospect that the territorial issue will be resolved anytime soon. Until then, the members of the armed forces stationed here will continue to hope their prayers are heard. Charmaine de Gracias, NHK World in the Spratly Islands.
We continue our two-part special on the Spratly Islands. Countries including the Philippines and China lay claim to the islands in the South China Sea, and tension has been rising as China's military influence spreads. NHK World Charmaine de Gracias took a rare trip into the disputed zone on board a Philippine Navy vessel and filed this report.
Day 4 of our journey with the Philippine Navy. The ship enters an area where the Chinese military is increasingly active. In February, a Chinese warship fired warning shots at a Philippine fishing boat.
In the past month, there was a reported harassment of local fishermen. We should be very watchful, vigilant. That is to avoid also to be caught unaware.
This footage from June last year shows an Indonesian patrol ship investigating a Chinese fishing boat near the southern edge of the South China Sea. An armed Chinese fishery surveillance vessel suddenly appears.
Do you have a map in this area? Because in our map, in our GPS, this is Indonesian area, Zona Ekonomi Eksklusif Indonesia.
Southeast Asian countries face a difficult situation in the South China Sea. The Philippines decided to beef up its bases in the area. Work is underway to build a new facility to protect this tiny island, which is about 400 meters long and 30 meters wide. Small islands like this are susceptible to waves and strong winds. The military personnel stationed there are cut off from their families. Living in such an environment puts them under a lot of strain.
If I see their pictures, I'll just be sad. That's why it's better if I don't have any pictures of them with me. I just read to keep my mind off them.
On some islands, civilians play an important role. Pag-asa is the second largest among the Spratly Islands. 9 families, a total of 53 people, live on the island. The Philippine government asks them to live here. It pays them a monthly allowance of about $130, an average salary in a provincial city on the mainland. It also provides them with free rice. Residents keep livestock and grow farm produce. They're very aware of their role protecting the island.
It would be very difficult for China to take this island because many civilians are living here. We'll continue protecting this island.
No matter how hard, for the people, it's about living for free, and for the government, sustaining it. All these pains for what they claim is theirs in this disputed territory. Charmaine Dayo-Gracias, NHK World, Pag-asa Island in the Spratlys.
At least 327 people are confirmed dead after Typhoon Bopha struck the Philippines earlier this week. 250,000 people are living in shelters. Many have yet to receive any assistance from the authorities. NHK World's Charmaine Dayo-Gracias reports.
Typhoon Bopha passed Mindanao Island in the southern Philippines on Tuesday. Heavy rains caused floods and landslides in Compostela Valley and Davao Oriental provinces in the eastern part of the island. The Category 5 typhoon toppled trees, knocked down power lines, and bursted riverbanks that carried these boulders, burying homes and families. Then they account for the hundreds still missing. Emergency services say 327 people have died and 380 more are missing. 250,000 people have been forced from their homes.
The people were shocked because it happened so fast.
90 people died in New Bataan in Compostela Valley. On Thursday, military personnel struggled to rescue people stranded in damaged homes. At an evacuation shelter in the central part of the town, 3,000 people waited in line for the arrival of emergency supplies such as food and clothing.
I've lost all my furniture and money. I don't know how I'm supposed to live.
The Philippine government is trying to distribute goods and dispatch medical staff to the affected areas.
But destroyed roads and bridges are hampering relief operations. Gas stations have been damaged and there's a shortage of fuel. Mindanao was hit by another typhoon just a year ago, leaving 1,200 people dead. With another disaster so soon, people are questioning the government's preparedness. President Benigno Aquino issued a warning a day before the typhoon struck and told people to be prepared. But it wasn't enough to prevent extensive damage. Local people are worried and frustrated. Charmaine Dayo-Gracias, NHK World, New Bataan, Philippines.
Bohol Island was at the center of the quake. Around 3.4 million residents of Bohol and neighboring Cebu Island have been affected. 97,000 people have evacuated. Many remain in tents. NHK World's Charmaine Dayo-Gracias reports.
Bohol Island accounts for 90% of total casualties. Landslides and collapsed buildings caused a large portion of the fatalities. 2 days after the initial quake, rescuers reported more fatalities, driving up the total death toll. Collapsed bridges, landslides, and open ditches make it difficult for rescue teams to deliver aid supplies and for authorities to get a clear picture of the total damage.
When the aftershocks come, we evacuate to this place. We live near the shore. I'm afraid tsunami will come. We need water and food.
Tuesday's earthquake is the largest on record for the region, including Bohol and Cebu. The quake completely toppled a 400-year-old church. It had long served the community and was the oldest church in the country.
It was a massive tremor. I couldn't keep standing. City Hall collapsed, and the church, too. I thought it was the end of the world. I was so scared.
The area is popular with tourists, as is neighboring Cebu Island. The earthquake has damaged the region's image as a tourist destination. With the busy season approaching, many travelers have canceled their plans. As residents work to overcome the shock of the earthquake, they feel uncertainty over the economic impact to the area.
It's sad because if tourism do not come back, then the town will revert to its old self. The people here heavily rely on tourism for work.
The collapsed bridges and damaged roads in the area are hindering rescue operations and has begun to affect tourism and other industries. Many parts of the surviving infrastructure needs to be repaired. Residents are hoping the government will take swift action. Charmaine Dayo-Gracias, NHK World, Bohol, Philippines.
A survey by the Philippines military shows China has expanded its reclamation projects in the South China Sea. The disputed waters lie at the maritime heart of Southeast Asia. NHK World's Charmaine Dayo-Gracias reports from Manila.
Neighboring countries are increasingly alarmed over China's movements. NHK has obtained these reconnaissance photographs taken over the Spratly Islands in January and February by the Philippine military. Military officials say the photos show land reclaimed by China at two new locations, on Mischief Reef and Subi Reef. China claims sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea outlined in red. Other Southeast Asian nations claim parts of it too. The area is rich in natural resources, including oil and gas. The discovery of the two new sites comes after China launched 5 reclamation projects in the same area last year. Chinese workers have now reclaimed at least 1 square kilometer of the sea. At Fiery Cross Reef, long strips of shoal have been completely reclaimed. They were underwater in September. The Philippine military suspects China plans to use the new land to construct runways. The land measures 3 kilometers long and between 200 and 600 meters wide. A leading Philippine congressman has echoed public concerns that the Chinese projects are for military purposes.
As you can see now, China is rewriting the story. With these massive reclamation activities, they are virtually physically altering the features of these rocks into something more sustainable with a very wide land area.
China, however, says the work is legitimate.
No one should challenge what China does in its own backyard.
A U.S. official speaking to reporters on Monday called on China to exercise restraint.
China's land reclamation and construction activities are fueling greater anxiety within the region about China's intentions amid concerns they may militarize outposts on disputed land features in the South China Sea.
The South China Sea is now an Asian flashpoint. A key international shipping lane runs through it. The reclamation projects have become a matter of grave concern for neighboring countries and beyond. Charmaine Deo Gracias, NHK World, Manila.
And that wraps up our bulletin. I'm Tra Tirakasan in Bangkok.
Tra, thanks. Tanzanian police are investigating a highway collision.
The Philippine government and the nation's biggest Islamic rebel group signed a peace deal last year. Muslim rebels have fought an independence war for decades on Mindanao. The peace process is now at a critical point. Can both sides meet a June 2016 deadline for setting up a Muslim autonomous government? Well, Japan is deeply involved in bringing peace to the conflict-plagued island. NHK World's Charmaine Deo Gracias reports.
The peace deal with the more Islamic Liberation Front has not completely ended violence on Mindanao. Last month, a fierce firefight lasted here for about a week. The government forces and the MILF fighters together helped flush out a breakaway group that is opposed to the peace agreement. The battle in this rebel-controlled village cost nearly 50 lives. This shelter is home to 13,000 refugees from the violence.
We don't have water or food and have to sleep on the ground. We want the conflict to stop so we can return to our lives.
Al-Hajj Murad heads the Moro rebels. His signature is on the peace deal. We ask him for a progress report.
We are now facing another challenge in the roadmap to the peace process. We cannot afford to abandon the more than 17 years of engagement with the government.
Sadako Ogata has played a key role in Japan's efforts to help Mindanao. A veteran diplomat, Ogata also served as president of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Ogata first visited Mindanao in 2006. In talks with Murad, she promised Japan would back the island's development while trying to bring peace.
If peace is achieved, local people can work and create a future by themselves.
In 2011, Philippine President Benigno Aquino and Murad held their first unofficial talks in Japan. The meeting, mediated by the Japanese government, was a turning point.
It built confidence between myself and the president. We choose Japan because at the time Japan was very involved in the peace process. I have very high regards with Madam Ogata. She has been engaged in process of peace and for humanitarian activities.
Even during years of conflict, Japan helped nurture industries in Mindanao. This fish farm, created with Japanese technology, is the first of its kind on the island.
Our economic was developed. They established their own fund.
This junior high school was destroyed 40 years ago in the conflict. Classes resumed outdoors last year. Starting this summer, students will move into a brand new school built with Japanese aid.
I'll study hard to be an English teacher.
I want people to feel that they share the benefits of peace by taking advantage of educational opportunities and living better lives. I hope we can ensure a lasting peace.
Many challenges lie ahead in Mindanao, but Japan is helping create a lasting peace. Charmaine Deo Gracias, NHK World, Mindanao.
It's 8 p.m. in Japan. Welcome to Newsroom Tokyo. I'm Shobeppu.
And I'm Aki Shibuya.
First, let's start with the headlines.
Philippine President Benigno Aquino is visiting Japan. He's stressing the close links between the two nations as tensions mount in the South China Sea. Police in Thailand arrest an army general they suspect of taking part in trafficking of migrants. Japanese airbag maker Takata takes more heat in Washington from lawmakers who want answers about potentially fatal defects. And later on The Focus, we'll meet some of the 40,000 Japanese who volunteer to improve lives around the world over the past 50 years. Philippine President Benigno Aquino is on a 4-day visit to Japan. He's the first guest from this country to be given full state honors in 13 years.
Japan's Emperor and Empress welcomed Aquino at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. They had to move the welcome ceremony inside because of rain. Crown Prince Naruhito and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also attended. The emperor is reported to have said he's delighted with the president's visit. He said it will promote mutual understanding and friendship. Aquino expressed appreciation for Japan's support over the years. He later made a speech in the Diet. Aquino implicitly criticized reclamation work by China in the Spratly Islands. The Philippines claimed sovereignty over part of the archipelago in the South China Sea. Aquino didn't mention China by name.
The prosperity of maritime and coastal East and Southeast Asia, which relies greatly on the free movement of goods and peoples, is at risk of being disrupted by attempts to redraw the geographic limits and entitlements outside those clearly bestowed by the law of nations.
Aquino stressed the strong links between his country and Japan.
Ours is a partnership that can only grow stronger because it is based not on mere practicality, but on shared values and mutual respect amongst equals.
Aquino is scheduled to sit down with Abe on Thursday. He hopes to boost cooperation with Japan on maritime security.
Joining us in the studio is NHK Manila's bureau, Charmaine Deo Gracias. She's accompanying President Aquino's visit to Japan. Hello, Charmaine. Hi. Well, Aquino is the first state guest from the Philippines in 13 years here in Japan. Well, seeing at the situation in the Asian region now where China is expanding its maritime activities in the South China Sea with its proclamation activities in the waters of the Spratly Islands, how much do you think this issue is in the mind of the president, and what do you think he wants to achieve through his visit here?
Well, the Philippine government considers his visit very important, and the issue of the South China Sea is just as important because Japan is a nation that advocates freedom of navigation and the rule of law. Japan and the Philippines share the same position on this. Although the Philippines is a military ally of the U.S., it's extremely important for the Philippine leaders to make an appeal to the international community concerning the issue. I covered the president's speech earlier today in Tokyo. He didn't miss the opportunity to stress that it's important for Japan and the U.S. and EU to express their concerns on the issue. He said that it will make China more aware that it's important to follow international law.
The fact that he made the speech here in Tokyo could be seen as reflecting his view in this regard.
Well, Charmaine, what do you think the Philippines government is expecting specifically from the Japanese government?
Well, the Philippines apparently wants to strengthen ties with Japan in the field of maritime security. Aquino and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will meet tomorrow. And Abe is expected to pledge that Japan will provide patrol boats to the Philippines. Philippine leaders apparently believe cooperating more closely with Japan and the U.S. will send a warning to China in the context of the international community, including ASEAN. It's often said that ASEAN is not united and hasn't taken a stand strong enough on the South China Sea issue. Abe and Aquino will have a summit tomorrow, and we'll see what kind of language they will use regarding this issue in their joint statement.
Charmaine, thank you.
Thank you.